let's do it. The thing that we have been teasing, titillating, maybe edging up to this whole time. Let's have that conversation, because we've spent a lot of time in the past debunking a bunch of myths around porn addiction and around, silly ideas about what masturbation can do to you and how it can make you go blind. And we've talked about how all of that is bullshit. But I don't know that we've done a great job of really discussing some of the benefits of masturbation. So, Shannon, I read a great piece that you wrote for your blog. I want to make sure that people know that the link for that will also be in the show notes for this episode. But Shannon, take it away. Tell us a little bit about your thoughts here about the benefits of masturbation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think masturbation's a great topic in that absolutely anyone can do it. Doesn't matter if you're in a relationship or single or in a situationship, no matter what's going on, you can masturbate. It's your body. It's a part of your body that feels good. In fact, your whole body can feel good if you do it in a way that feels good to you. It's unique to each person. There's no way to masturbate in every possible way that exists. So there's always something new to discover. So it's just this never ending source of sexual pleasure that comes from you. There's plenty of health benefits that studies have shown, things like helping people sleep better, feel less stressed, it releases those feel good endorphins, that kind of thing. But it also can improve your relationships with other people, whether that's romantic or otherwise, and help you sort of expand your comfort zone so that you can experience more of life, both in and outside the bedroom. There's so many ways that masturbation adds to our lives. So I just think more people should be doing it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I feel like there is such a consolation prize kind of narrative around masturbation. Well, if you can't find somebody, just go fuck yourself. And I feel like people really miss out on the idea that masturbation is not a consolation for sex. Masturbation is sex. Sex isn't, or at least shouldn't be, defined as intercourse. But whenever I try and push that message, I get a lot of pushback. I mean, what can you say about that supposed hierarchy of sex?
Sure. I mean, if you're trying to get pregnant or get someone pregnant, then yeah, intercourse is most likely the kind of sex you're going to have. But we all know that there are multiple kinds of sex. We say the phrases oral sex, anal sex, titty sex. And so we know that those things are types of sex. We know they count. If you did it with someone else besides your monogamous partner, if you had one, they would probably consider those things cheating. You're deriving sexual pleasure from something with someone else. So why wouldn't solo sex or masturbation also be just as valid as all those other forms of sex? And I think part of the problem is this idea that sex is supposed to be for procreation. So people are just well, that's real sex, the kind of sex that could result in a pregnancy. That's real sex. Everything else isn't, it's whatever. But the reality is 99.999% of sex is not penis and vagina. And so yeah, I agree that, people make jokes about masturbation as oh, I guess you're masturbating because you can't find anyone to fuck you kind of thing. And that's really sad, because that tells me that people saying that have not experienced the kind of transformational solo sex that you can experience. I've definitely met people who can only orgasm through masturbation. And what are we telling them when we say that sex has to be partnered and that it doesn't count, if you're doing it by yourself? So I just think people need to be a little more open-minded about defining sex, definitely.
Yeah, and maybe break free of this sort of automatic pre-programmed notion that okay, I'm horny, I can't have sex, so I'll just pull out my phone and then, catch whatever is on the front page of Pornhub or whatever for 15 seconds and that's it.
Oh, yeah.
Of course that's not satisfying.
Oh yeah,
right?
I call that maintenance masturbation, right?
Yeah.
That's the, have a feeling, don't have time for anything else, or I just want to fall asleep, right? So you're just sort of maintaining
There's
it.
nothing wrong
And
with a quickie. I mean, I get that, but
totally, yeah.
every once in a while, I want a little romance.
Yeah, and then what happens is people think that that's all masturbation is, and that's almost like thinking quickies are the only kind of partnered sex you can have. Could you imagine if the only partnered sex you ever had was quickies? Your sex life would be very different, probably. And so it's the same with masturbation. If you would like to have almost like transformational experiences with masturbation, you are going to have to step outside of the box a little bit, and spend more than 5 minutes, whatever the video in front of Pornhub is today,
Man, y'all are efficient. I'm feeling like I'm doing it wrong.
Or right, maybe?
Maybe?
Depends. Maybe you're closer to right.
Sure, we'll go with that.
I always hate putting times on it because everyone's so different. That's another thing that I get is, people who say, "Oh, I'm so quick to orgasm. It takes me 10 minutes." And I'm like, that's not necessarily quick, depending on who your partner is, what your level of satisfaction is. And then completely on the other side, people say, "Oh, I take too long. I take a whole 3 minutes," or something like that. And so I hate putting times on things because it's all relative.
Sure.
It's completely up to you, your enjoyment. And if you are having sex with a partner, then your partner's enjoyment as well.
Yeah. Well, you mention in your article a number of different benefits. Is there anything in particular that you feel like people maybe aren't aware of or aren't leaning into as much as they could benefit from it?
Yeah, some of the more, for my friends who do sort of masturbate intentionally, as I describe it, those who do take the time to really sink into it, when they're sort of ready to level up, the stuff I start to introduce them to are things like orgasm control.
Mhm.
How long, you made a joke about edging, you kind of teased edging earlier, but yeah, how long can you sort of take yourself to that edge, but not go over it? Can you go up to it and then can you back away from it? And then can you approach it again? And many people find that when they do edging and they experience that, and this is regardless of your body, your gender, anyone can do this. Many people find that the more they do that, the more they push themselves to the edge and back off, or push themselves to the edge and hold it for as long as they can, the more powerful their orgasms become. So for a lot of people, that can unlock sometimes the most powerful orgasm they've ever had in their life. And again, they're doing this alone. So again, don't tell me partnered sex is the only valuable sex if it's, giving people their most powerful orgasms. So that's a big one. Some people do use masturbation to help with partnered sex. For a lot of penis owners, orgasming before partnered sex with masturbation can help them last longer with a partner in partnered sex. So it's a very common use. And then increasingly, we're finally getting more and more studies about masturbation in vulva owners. And we're actually discovering that vulva owners who are comfortable with masturbation, and especially with sex toys, are more likely to orgasm during partnered sex and also experience more natural lubrication. So there are all these, things that we're still learning. Definitely, there's a lot of emerging information, but definitely, yeah, don't miss out on this stuff. It's good stuff.
To think about how fundamental this is. I mean, the fact that, and let's just go ahead and be frank and talk about it, the fact that even young infants will enjoy some level of self-stimulation and will participate in activities at very young ages where they are enjoying and exploring their body. And yet, as fundamental as masturbation is, we have so few research studies on it. We have so little academic and scientific interest because of these same purity culture, sex is for babies kind of thinking that is just all over our culture.
Absolutely. And it's something I often have to tell clients that I work with is any shame you have around this stuff is all learned. It's
Mm-hmm.
all stuff that you learned. You were not born ashamed of that area of your body. You were not born knowing to avoid it or associating sexual activity with, guilt. So anything that you're feeling there is learned. And if you would like to unlearn it, you can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like there is such a cultural narrative around the idea that masturbation will make you bad at sex, that it'll somehow like ruin you for partnered sex. And that's maybe particularly a idea that we throw at men because we don't even really acknowledge that women tend to masturbate. So that's a whole separate problem. But hearing you talk about edging and about orgasm control, about being able to, I don't know, master your body in these different ways, that can only lead to better sex, right? Like that can only lead to more control and more like mindful, intentional experiences. I mean, how does that operate here?
Yeah, the vast majority of people I've worked with in terms of improving masturbation practices or even just getting more familiar with their bodies, because, in a lot of cases, people haven't ever been afforded a safe space to explore their own body. So sometimes we're just talking about very, very basic comfort stuff. But out of all the people I work with, I would say, 9 out of 10, it's all about improving their sex life, and their sex life does improve, whether it's with
Mm,
themselves or with partners or both. There are some cases, maybe 1 out of 10, where someone's girlfriend reaches out to me and says, "My boyfriend won't have sex with me anymore because he's watching porn and masturbating instead, and our sex life has completely fallen apart." And so that obviously is an example of something, gripping someone's attention and a habit forming, and usually there's other relationship problems happening there,
sure.
and things outside of sex that are also going on. So that requires a little bit more in-depth counseling. But yeah, for the vast majority of people seeking help with this kind of stuff, it is to improve sex life and to become way more comfortable being naked, being, sexually stimulated, finding pleasure in that without shame or guilt, and just unlocking these deeper levels of pleasure and feeling free to enjoy that pleasure without shame.
Sure. Well, we'll tease out some of the potential pitfalls or other concerns that might come up a little bit later in the episode. But for now, is it safe to say that for the vast majority of people, more time, more energy, more perhaps intentionality around masturbation is almost always a good thing? Is that too strong a
Absolutely.
language?
No, I would say intentional masturbation, setting time aside for it and genuinely investing in good, prolonged masturbation experiences will improve your sex life.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, we've kind of flirted with the idea of mindfulness tonight, and already talked very recently about more mindfulness in sex. How does that intentionality show up here? What would mindful masturbation look like?
Yeah, for those who are open to it, I sometimes get some resistance with mindfulness because some people think there's a spiritual aspect to mindfulness, and that's not necessarily the case for everyone. Plenty of people practice mindfulness without any kind of spiritual association. And so, if you are open to mindfulness, and if you're not sure you're ready to do mindfulness and masturbation at the same time, that's okay. You can start with just one or the other and being more intentional with one or the other, and then when you're ready, introducing them to each other in, slow ways that feel comfortable for you. The wonderful thing about mindfulness is that it's so focused on being present in the moment and letting go of thoughts about the past and the future. And it allows you not only to be present in the moment with your pleasure while masturbating, but when you do that, you're practicing a mental habit that will carry over into partnered sex as well, allowing you to be more present in the moment with your partner. So many people get distracted during sex thinking about their to-do list, or they notice the pile of laundry in the room and they just get very distracted. The more you can learn to associate sexual pleasure with being present in the moment, and mindfulness is one way to do that, the more you're able to be present with your partners, whether now or in the future.
I am so glad you brought that up, Shannon, because that was exactly my hang up before I started doing any kind of like mindfulness or meditation. I actually only did it because a friend of mine like hooked me up with like a free trial to a program, and I was like, okay, fine, I'll do it. But I thought it was going to be some kind of like woo woo thing, and then we're going to do like I didn't even know. I thought it was just not going to be my cup of tea because I don't like anything in the like spiritual realm. And it wasn't that at all. I was like, oh my goodness, why have I not been doing this more? It really is just getting in touch with what's happening and not distracting myself with random BS intrusive thoughts, that I didn't even realize I was having. And it
Yeah.
was, yeah, I found it the same way you described, where, yeah, this is great for, being in my own head, but also that's really helpful when I'm interacting with another human too.
Yeah, I mean, it really the skills are transferable, as we say, right?
Yeah.
And I think, just full disclosure so that, people can maybe see themselves in this a little bit more. I tried mindfulness maybe 4 different times over the course of 2 to 3 years, trying to get into it to manage anxiety, back in maybe 2016 and 17, and then 18, and then 19. And it took a while to really find, and I started it and then I stopped it and I started it and I stopped it. And then when I finally did manage to get into mindfulness in tiny increments, I would do 3 to 5 minutes a day because it was all I could tolerate. That still mattered. It still counted. It still meant I was spending 3 to 5 minutes emptying my mind. And then when we were all on lockdown and not allowed to go anywhere and
Sure.
dating in the way I normally date was irresponsible, I was by myself a whole awful lot. And this is how my own personal journey of mindful masturbation began was, okay, can I apply this to this thing over here? Can I touch myself and pleasure myself while being completely present with that pleasure? Can I challenge myself to not watch or listen to porn or erotica? Can I challenge myself to not fantasize about my crushes or think back to, previous good sexual experiences? Like, can I just get off on getting off? Is that possible? And that's really where I started to discover, oh, wow, there's like a whole other world of pleasure here. Let's share it with other people.
Yeah. No, Kara, I'm glad that you acknowledge some of that tension or discomfort that people often have around woo and some of these kinds of things, because I feel like a lot of people will tell me that they can't meditate or that mindfulness doesn't work for them. And I want to absolutely acknowledge that no single strategy is right for everybody, just like no single exercise is right for everybody. Like, I hate going to the gym. I hate using free weights, but I love doing cardio. Other people are the opposite in so many ways. And I just want to tell everybody that if a 3-minute meditation feels like a lot for you, that's okay. There are times in your exercise journey where a walk around the block might be a lot for you. So whether you are, running a marathon or whether you are working to stand up for the first time after an accident or heal from some injury or work through some other form of disability, whatever feels like exercise to you is exercise. And I think that applies to mindfulness. And if adding in a little masturbation, a little sexuality to your mindfulness makes it a lot less boring and a lot more appealing, maybe this is your ticket to actually get started on that journey.
Yeah, I love that. It's so interesting because for some people, both masturbation and mindfulness are difficult or tricky spaces. But
Sure.
if you're familiar or comfortable with one, yeah, introduce the other.
Yeah. Well, so are there any other like guidelines or recommendations, good ideas for people who are looking to maybe add a little bit of romance and panache to their self-love?
Oh yeah, I think I've used the word intentional and intentionality a couple times. That's really where it's at, is making the masturbation that you're about to do different than that quick pull up the first video on Pornhub. We're just going to do this so I can fall asleep tonight. That's your maintenance masturbation. That's fine, and there's nothing wrong with it. If you don't want that quickie, then what you want is to say, do what I did, ban yourself from Pornhub for this particular experience. Set yourself a timer for longer than it usually takes you and challenge yourself to drag the experience out a little longer. If you do appreciate things like bubble baths, scented candles, using scented massage oils on the exterior parts of your body, not the interior, because those are bad on the interior parts.
Read the label.
Yeah. If those are things that make you feel good, that's kind of the point. Do things that make you feel good when you're trying to make yourself feel good. So whatever is romance for you, if it's going out camping and doing yourself in a tent, then that's for you. Do that. Do what works for you.
I love that. That is great advice.